Coming up next on Insights on PBS Hawaii, changing factors in Hawaii's storm risk. Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Malia Mattoch, your host for tonight's show. Insights had originally planned to feature the candidates for Kauai mayor, but due to preparations for Tropical Storm Ana, we've postponed the appearance by incumbent Mayor Bernard Carvalho and his challenger, Dustin Barca. Instead, we are turning our focus to the factors that are affecting Hawaii's storm risk. With Hawaii Island still recovering from Tropical Storm Isel, eyes are now on Tropical Storm Ana, which could hit Hawaii as a hurricane this weekend. Ana is the third tropical cyclone that has threatened or hit the islands this hurricane season. Is it unusual to have this many severe storms in a short period of time? Is there a reason behind it, or is it a coincidence? And coupled with rising sea levels, are the state's coastlines more at risk from storm surges and high waves than they were when Iniki arrived more than 2 decades ago? What are the changing factors in Hawaii's storm risk? We invite you to join our conversation by calling, emailing, or tweeting your questions and comments. Now to our panel. Gary Barnes is chairman of the Meteorology Department at the University of Hawaii Manoa and is an expert in hurricanes. Professor Barnes has flown into the eyes of hurricanes to study them and has written extensively on the subject. Robert Ballard is the Science and Operations Officer for the Central Pacific Hurricane Center and Weather Forecast Office. Doug Mayne is the Vice Director of Civil Defense for the state of Hawaii. As Vice Director, Mr. Mayne is responsible for coordinating Hawaii's disaster preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation activities. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us tonight, especially on relatively short notice. Let me start with you, Mr. Ballard. Could you tell us what you were seeing on the satellite today? What's the latest update?
Sure. It looks like over the last few hours, Ana has begun to get better organized. We were forecasting an organizational increase during the day today, and it's finally looking like it's finally starting to happen. Some of the things that we're seeing on satellite lead us to believe that the core is beginning to get better developed. So again, this is something that we were expecting, and we're just going to have to keep an eye on it as we go through the night and into tomorrow to see what it does. Tropical cyclones sometimes don't always do exactly what you think they're going to do. So hopefully everyone will watch it with us.
Well, would you say things are starting to look increasingly active and interesting at this point?
Yeah, we'll have to keep a close eye on it. Of course, over the next 24 to 48 hours will be critical to watch the movement to see whether or not it's going to be sort of on the right side or northern side of that cone of uncertainty that I think most of the viewers probably have seen from our website, or whether or not it remains a little bit weaker and stays a little farther south and is less of an impact to the islands.
Dr. Barnes is a hurricane expert. What are you looking for right now?
Well, looking at the satellites, when you have just visible wavelengths or light reflected back and you have a big, what we call central dense overcast, you can't really see what's going on. But the polar orbiters have different microwave sensors. And as Bob just mentioned, in the last 6 hours, we're finally seeing a stronger band of deep convection occur on the south to east sides of the storm. And also there's another channel that looks at where the rain is, and we're finally seeing a complete ring. So at this stage, we might start to finally develop an eye, a warm core that will let the intensity really increase.
Mr. Mayne, a host of things have already been canceled for the weekend. And from a civil defense point of view, at what point, how far out do you have to start to make the big decisions in terms of closing parks, that sort of thing? I mean, when do these decisions start to be made?
Well, many of those decisions are made by the county civil defense agencies. We started our coordination with the counties, our state partners and federal partners on Monday. We had our first video teleconference. Some of the big decisions we have to make include bringing resources from the mainland to support us, asking the governor for an emergency proclamation, which provides authority for us to do certain things and to spend money. those we try and get about 72 hours out to first landfall so that we have time to react and make the decisions. The counties over the next 24 to 48 hours will be making decisions about closures of parks, and the state agencies will also. Department of Education has already canceled school for Hawaii County for tomorrow. So we really work hard to make the decisions as early as we possibly can so that we can inform the public of what's going on, because that's probably the most important thing we can do, is keep the public informed as we head into the storm, and then posture local, state, and federal government and the non-governmental agencies to respond rapidly to any threats that do develop, and to take any response actions that we need to take as the storm passes through.
Let's go to some of the questions we asked at the top of the show. Mr. Ballard, are we having more storms? It feels to a lot of people as if we are. It might be a combination of the tsunami warnings and the hurricane warnings that we've had of late. Are we experiencing an increase in Hawaii?
Well, this particular season has been pretty active, certainly, with Iselle already making landfall. We had the remnants of Tropical Cyclone Wally, which brought really heavy rain to the windward shore earlier this year. And of course now we have another threat from Tropical Storm Ana. Typically what we see in situations where the ocean temperatures are warmer around and south of Hawaii, which corresponds to El Nino type conditions. We're not quite in an El Nino yet, but we're sort of on the verge of that. Those types of seasons, we do see increased activity in the Central Pacific. We started the season talking about that we thought that the Central Pacific was going to be active again this year. And so I think that seems to be panning out quite nicely, actually.
So what's the science behind that? I mean, what's the recipe for a hurricane?
Well, hurricanes require warm sea surface temperature. They require the ocean, needs to be warm in order for a hurricane to develop. You want converging winds, which generally occurs when you have thunderstorm activity, which gets going in the intertropical convergence zone to the south and southeast of Hawaii. When that happens and the thunderstorms become vigorous enough and they last long enough, they can develop into tropical cyclone, and that's kind of what we need. There's other factors that are involved too. You need light winds at upper levels. I feel like Dr. Barnes is quizzing me right now. He's actually my advisor, so I may
He's
get
doing
graded
pretty well
on,
so far.
I may get graded on this later.
There's another crucial ingredient. Very often we can always have deep convection to our south in what we call the near equatorial convergence zone or whatever. What's different, and what's a little different about this year, is if we have very weak trades down there, or we actually have westerly winds, that provides a background, what we call vorticity or spin. Yeah. And that's what we've had much more of this year because the NECZ is a little further north, a little more active. Westerly winds and then trade winds, you have a background spin, so when the convection occurs, it can concentrate it.
And that's what's happening.
Yep.
This season it seems to be happening a lot.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that happen.
Is there a bigger picture issue here? Global warming, El Nino, what is the Pacific becoming more active?
The long-term trends, there's years that go up and down, but the long-term global trends on tropical cyclone counts have been almost stable at a little over 80, which maybe surprises a lot of people. The key issue there is why everyone is noticing things are definitely getting warmer, and they go, oh, we're going to have more hurricanes. You're also changing the wind field, and you have to have a lot of the ingredients that Bob talked about all co-located. So, for instance, I create a warmer body of water, but I have greater variation in the winds or wind shear, then you won't see a storm form. A hurricane has to create a column, if you will, of very warm air. That's what drives the pressure down. So if you can't maintain that column, or it keeps getting diluted by environmental air or tilted over, there's different ways of thinking about that, you won't get a tropical cyclone to form.
So in other words, some of the factors that are coming into play might essentially cancel each other out?
Could be.
All right. We've, of course, just experienced, the Big Island has just experienced so much damage from Iselle. One of the things that came up were these albizia, am I saying this correctly? Albizia. Albizia trees.
Sounds like a pet dog.
It does. We've got a lot on Oahu. Has there been any discussion about sort of proactively taking these down since they proved to be such an issue?
The albizia trees are an issue. They're an introduced species. They're a very weak tree, which is the problem. They're a fast-growing tree and weak tree, and even in a high wind, they tend to break and cause damage. We've had a program for a number of years where state civil defense or any any state agency has the authority to take out albizia trees that are a nuisance. Unfortunately, up until this past year, we've never been funded to do that. We now have funds where we can actually start to cut some of these albizia trees, and we're starting to do that. However, we're talking about millions of trees over all of the islands. We're also working with Hawaii. Hawaii County has started an albizia tree task force where they're looking at proactive measures, and they have some very interesting methods now that they're looking at, including basically a poison, an herbicide that they can put into these trees. And within 2 weeks, it drops its branches, or it drops its canopy, and the branches start to dry up and fall off, and they become very light pieces of wood. And they've experimented with this on the Big Island. And the interesting thing was that all of the trees that they treated this way, none of them fell from Tropical Storm Iselle. Because if you lose the top hamper, if you lose the leaves, you don't have this large area for the wind to grab onto and knock down. So we're working with the Big Island in their task force. It's a local, state, and federal task force to try and work on this. They might take the program statewide. They are an issue. We're trying to work with whoever's interested in developing counters to these albizia trees because they are very, very hazardous. And without the albizia trees, much of the damage on the Big Island would not have occurred.
And so not enough time to get it done before this storm, but hopefully going into the future, it's a massive project.
It's a massive project.
Yeah.
It'll take decades,
Yeah.
centuries to deal with this.
To get done. Let me direct this question, I think, to you, Dr. Barnes. What causes a hurricane such as Iniki to take a hard right turn off its predicted path? And could something like that happen with this storm?
Well, right now, looking at the first thing you would look at is the large-scale deep layer flow field. So in the troposphere, where all the weather is, we measure the winds, and you can define maybe an average flow in there. And if it's pretty even through the atmosphere, say 15 or 20 knots through a deep layer, the first thing the storm is going to act like is just like a cork in the stream. It's going to move with the deep layer winds. What happened with Iniki is we had a large trough, extratropical weather, if you will, come in and change our flow from easterly rapidly to southwest to northeast, or almost south to north. And the storm got caught up in that and turned. Now, there are other factors that control storm motion. There's a variation in the Coriolis across the globe, and that's a complicated factor we call beta effect. There's also dynamics in the storm in which if you have a flare-up in one part of the eye wall of deep convection, the circulation center will actually migrate closer to that. So you can get trochoidal wobbles and things of that sort. And then as the storm interacts with variations in the wind shear, that will cause parts of the storm to collapse, others to develop, and it'll move in response to that. So the motion gets fairly complicated. Right now, I don't think there's a trough setting up or anything that would necessarily drive us rapidly northward with a sharp turn like Iniki did.
So right now it's not looking like that. So in layman's terms, what would we be looking for this storm to do something like that? Just in a simple.
If I suddenly saw let the storm track along and get south of South Point, so it's just due south of the whole archipelago, and then have a nice, steady, deep layer of southerly winds develop.
That's the
that
recipe.
Would get my full attention.
Okay. Mr. Ballard, let me direct this question to you. It's from Loretta and Kailua. Why are storms so difficult to track?
Well, some of the challenges with forecasting tropical cyclones Dr. Barnes just talked about, we are trying to look at different layers of the atmosphere and figure out what the wind directions are in order to account for what the steering flow is for the cyclone. You have to consider how deep is the storm itself. Does it extend over the whole depth of the troposphere, or is it a shallow system? That can change the movement, and it can actually do that rather suddenly. There are other issues like what you mentioned with trochoidal wobbles, convection developing near the center.
I love that word, trochoidal wobble.
Trochoidal, that when the cyclone kind of moves, in a in a like a figure 8 type thing. So you have all sorts of complicated things that we have to try to understand, and we don't particularly measure well. That's one of the reasons, for example, you may have heard that we have an aircraft which is sampling the atmosphere around the system. The Air Force hurricane hunters, of course, give us a lot of information with what's going on inside the storm. But if you want to know where the storm is going, you need to look at the environment around the storm, and that's one of the things that the NOAA G4 plane is doing for us. They're flying around on the periphery of the system, trying to figure out what the steering flow is out ahead of it. We don't get a lot of true measurements aside from when aircraft are out here flying. We have to use satellite as a proxy to try to understand what the wind is doing at different layers of the atmosphere, and that's a tricky game to play. It's not always the data sparseness out here makes it difficult to try to assess all of that. So tropical cyclone is a complex thing to forecast anyway, but then when you have to deal with the limited data that we have here in the Central Pacific, it makes it even more difficult. Thank goodness we have the reconnaissance aircrafts which are going to be out there. The hurricane hunters will be going in tonight, and they will be giving us a lot of really good information about the storm structure, and that should help us out a lot with where Anna is going in the future.
Yeah, then I have to ask Dr. Barnes, you've actually flown into a hurricane, correct?
Yeah.
What is that like?
My students have often asked me that question, and I said, let's get into a wobbly chair, sit down, and let me throw a thin veil over your head. And then every once in a while, I'm going to shake the living daylights out of that chair and spin you around. And they go, and then you can only see through this veil, and it's a light gray. Very often in the storm, the visibility is not dramatic. It's raining in a lot of places. There's many layers of clouds, and you're bouncing along, and the turbulence, I think a lot of people have seen turbulence at much worse landing in summertime in Denver.
Really?
Most of the time. Every once in a while you can get a very unusual event in the inner edge of the eye wall where a vortex or a small vortice can break loose, a set of vortices, and when you go through that you can see some high drama. I had some friends who were on board in Hugo, I think it was. Was it Hugo? Yeah. And they went in at 1,500 feet and they suddenly got 4 G's acceleration up, 2 G's down. A warning light came on the engine, and when they finally got into the eye, they were down to 700 feet, and they were going, this might not be a very good flight. And then they waited for another plane to come in and say, okay, here's a soft section of the eye wall. And they slowly gained altitude because they only have 3 engines now. And then they went back home, and one of my great technicians and engineers walked off the plane, came out, kissed the runway, and said, I'm done.
And never went back. What about you?
Never went back.
When
I
you
wasn't
did
on
it-
that flight, and I
But
like
when
to
you
go.
did do it, did you think that was a thrill? I want to do that again, or did you think never
The
again?
very first time I went, we took off at midnight in Miami, and we went into a storm, and about 10 hours later, that's the exhausting thing. You are airborne a long time in low-grade turbulence. It really beats up the body. Came home, and we went over to grab breakfast, and somebody came rushing in and said, there's another seat on the next flight in an hour, and I ran off when I caught it. So I did back-to-back, and everybody since then said, you're damaged goods.
You were hooked.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayne, let's talk about the economics of this. In terms of Ezel, do we have a figure on what sort of damage that ended up doing?
We're still writing up the projects, working with FEMA and our partners that suffered the damage, but it looks like it's somewhere between $10 and $12 million damage that we've been able to account for in the 2 counties that we got the disaster declaration for. There was damage on some damage here on Oahu that we didn't make the threshold for a FEMA disaster declaration, but it was in the neighborhood of $400,000. So total damage about 10 to 12 million in another year or 2 or 3. Once we get the projects completed and built, we'll know for sure, but it'll be in that neighborhood.
People got, would put out, be the word, a little put out when the Ezel damage didn't quite make the cut for some of the federal sort of disaster.
Right.
Can you explain what goes into that? How do they decide?
Well, there's actually 3 federal programs, but there's 2 that you apply for. One is public assistance, which is assistance to governments and certain nonprofits to repair damage that happens, so to return infrastructure to pre-damage condition. That's public assistance. There's also individual assistance, and those are grants to families that have suffered damage. According to the federal regulation that governs FEMA, they establish small, medium, and large state indicators. It's not a threshold, it's an indicator for damaged homes. So for a state of our size, FEMA is looking for somewhere in the neighborhood of 173 homes that have suffered major damage, which means it takes longer than 30 days to repair, or that have been destroyed. So that's the indicator that they're looking for. That's not the whole, it's not everything. Other factors, the number of deaths, the economics, what's happening economically, all play into that also. From ESEL, we did a lot of damage assessments, looked at a lot of homes with the county and with FEMA, and we had a total of 39 homes that suffered either major damage or were destroyed. Now it's terrible for the families. It's a disaster for them. The way the federal government looks at it is that 39 homes is not close to the indicator. There should be local and state programs. It should be within the capacity of local and state government to provide programs to support those families that have suffered the loss. And therefore, they did not deem the loss for the individual assistance program to be beyond the scope of local and state government to support.
So in other words, they're not saying you didn't suffer. They're saying your state can handle this problem.
Your state should be able to handle it, should be within the capacity of the state government, and quite frankly, I have to say the non-governmental organizations, because typically when we do have these losses that don't meet the FEMA standard, it's mostly the NGOs that step in and provide the support. We have some programs at the county and the state level to provide support, but the vast majority of the support is provided by Red Cross, Salvation Army, the voluntary organizations active in disasters, the local VOAD, Aloha United Way, or Hawaii, I think it's East Hawaii United Way. Anyway, there's a lot of local nonprofit organizations in the county. There's a lot at the state level, and then the federal levels, the federal agencies. I shouldn't say federal, the national level organizations also support their local chapters.
So millions of dollars of losses on the Big Island from ESEL.
And Maui, I have to say.
And Maui, of course, you're right.
County
Thank you. Of course, and if this storm were to hit Oahu, we could be looking at upwards. If it were to hit Waikiki, some of our urban areas, what sort of financial damage could we be looking at?
Well, some of the modeling that we've done for our catastrophic hurricane plan, it's in the billions of dollars of losses, both for infrastructure, for individual homes, but also business interruption. That's really, when you start looking at the numbers, the business interruption losses are huge. After Iniki, Kauai took a huge hit on tourism. They lost population. It took them almost a decade to come back. The other thing about these disasters is that nationally, 40% of small businesses that are affected never reopen. So you lose 40% of your small businesses, and Hawaii has a huge number of small businesses. And so when we go out and talk with our communities about preparedness, we talk about business preparedness, about not only having a plan for your family, but having a plan for your business, and how are you backing up your data, how do you plan to get your doors back open. Anecdotally, from Hurricane Iniki, 5 days was the magic number. If you could get your business back open within 5 days, generally you would survive. If you couldn't get it back open within 5 days, you weren't going to reopen. And that was across the sectors.
If this were to hit Oahu, in terms of hitting, say it hits the South Shore, say it hits one part of the island, does that mean that the rest of Oahu is scot-free, or does it mean that then it starts to cause other weather conditions on the island?
Well, there's a couple issues there. One is, I think you want to be careful about saying hit. It certainly, if we took a direct hit, which doesn't appear likely at this point, but it's not completely out of the realm of possibility, things are going to be pretty bad. But the effects of tropical cyclones extend a long way from the center. And so even if the storm doesn't make landfall or make a direct hit, it can still provide significant impacts. You know, you're going to have all sorts of things, and of course we're going to be, one way or another, we're almost certain to be on what's known as the right side or the stronger side of the system. So that can cause all sorts of effects where you could have downslope accelerating winds, where the winds slow down as they blow up and over the mountain and then speed up as they go downslope. You can have issues from high surf and surge. We are pretty certain that we're going to see some pretty exceptional surf along the south and west shores as Ana goes by. And then another thing is you have this big envelope of moisture which follows the system, and we're pretty certain that we're going to see quite a bit of rainfall as this system moves slowly up the chain. If it goes a little farther to the south and west, the conditions could be quite a bit better, and people may wonder, you know, where did the storm go? It wouldn't take much of a nudge to the northeast of our forecast track to begin really increasing the threat for wind, heavy rain, and surge and surf. So that's, again, why we're watching it very carefully. We hope that people are understanding that we have to keep an eye on this, and also understanding that we're not perfect at forecasting these things, that you can't just focus on the skinny black line, as one of my colleagues used to say. You have to really consider the possibilities, which is what we're doing. That's one of the reasons why we have the Big Island in a tropical storm watch, is that we're really hoping that people will pay attention to that and have their readiness plans and make sure that they're getting ready for the storm.
I think.
You know, one thing I'd like to add, because I find myself focusing on the skinny black line a lot, and that's mostly because I'm hoping, but the cone of uncertainty is only I mean, that's 80%. So 20% of the time, correct me if I'm wrong.
It's about 2/3.
Okay,
yeah,
2/3. I'm sorry,
67%.
67%. Yeah, I'm so it's even worse than I was thinking.
Worse.
Right. So 1/3 of the time, the track is going to be outside of the cone of uncertainty, and that's why we need to make sure that people keep focused on the fact that this is a tropical storm or a hurricane, and you know, the difference between a hurricane and a tropical storm is only, or a tropical storm and a hurricane is only 1 mile per hour of wind.
So really not
So
much,
there,
no.
so it could be a strong tropical storm or a weak hurricane. It's the same thing. It's a lot of wind, it's a lot of water, it's a lot of surf, and it's a lot of impacts on the island. And so we really want people to remain focused on the fact that this is a powerful storm. It's out there. It will create impacts that will affect the islands.
One thing to add to what you said too about the cone, and I saw a couple of folks on social media that were not quite understanding this, is that cone of uncertainty is it's 67% probability of where the center of the cyclone is likely to go. The point there being that damaging effects can extend well outside the cone. Even if our forecast is perfect, you're going to have the cyclone is a couple hundred miles across, so, or at least. So you're going to have damaging effects from wind, rain, and surge and surf beyond the error cone, or cone of uncertainty, as some folks call it. So don't think that just because you're outside that cone that you're safe. It's important to realize that a cyclone is not a point, it's not a dot on a map. Sometimes I wish we could take that map that we have on our website and put a larger symbol to kind of cover up more of the area that we think would be impacted. But of course, if we did that, then you'd see a much larger swath would be under the map, right? So that's just something else to consider about all that.
Yeah, the high winds in the storm we often refer to as intensity, but when you think of a storm with near zero winds in the eye and they go out to a peak, then you have the shoulders, and what Bob's talking about, the size, or what we often call the strength of the winds. So out beyond the eye wall for the next few degrees, what's the average condition? And you can have storms that might both produce 100-mile-an-hour winds in the eye wall, and you could go another 50 miles out and sometimes it'd be almost calm, or just blowing 10 miles an hour out there, or it could still be blowing 80 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
You were saying before the show that it's almost a guarantee we'll see some very significant winds this weekend, correct?
I think we're going to see some gale force here on the islands.
Yeah, I think it's likely that we're going to see at least some increase in the wind. If Ana behaves and stays well on the south side of our forecast track right now, the wind effects would probably be a lot less. And again, I think people will probably wonder, well, what's the big deal? What happened? If it goes on the right side of the forecast track, then the wind effects could be considerably worse. So that's one of the reasons why we're really cautious right now. You were talking about this with me before the show, and I started seeing that move to the west-northwest on satellite imagery today, and I went and got extra food. So when the meteorologist is starting to take preparations, it's like, okay, I'm going to blink. I'm getting a little nervous. It's time to do a little extra precaution for this. And the phrase hope for the best, prepare for the worst. That's what I hope everyone is doing. And if we don't get significant impacts this weekend from Ana, I think we can consider ourselves very lucky, because this is one that we really still need to be paying close attention to.
All right, that is good information. If you're just joining us, the program Insights had originally planned for tonight, featuring the candidates for Kauai mayor, has been postponed due to preparations for Tropical Storm Ana. In its place, we are turning our focus to the factors that are affecting Hawaii storm risk. Let's go to some questions. We've got quite a few. James from Makiki asks, what effects could bigger, more frequent storms have on Hawaii's reef, I suppose, and the greater sort of ecosystem of the islands? Anyone want to take that question?
Well, I thought Iniki really beat up the reef around Kauai. So if we had more storms, it would not be a good thing at all for that ecosystem, as far as I know.
I'm not an expert in the ocean side of the fluid fence, but the one thing that I've heard talked about earlier this summer was the fact that some of the conditions which may have helped to lead up to storms like Isel and Ana have been the light wind conditions and the warm sea surface temperatures around the islands. And of course, I think what I've read is that that's leading to some coral bleaching problems and things like that. So aside from the storm itself, I think that those types of conditions are not very healthy for the oceans. It's a fairly sensitive environment that doesn't like to be far from its normal condition.
Storm and environmental risk.
Right, and of course, storms are going to alter that as well. So.
Right. From David via email, might it be possible to re-engineer some of Hawaii's large stock of old cargo containers into Category 5 hurricane shelters for rural areas? Do you think from a civil defense standpoint we'll have to get more creative?
We are we're currently building our stock of hurricane shelters in a couple ways. We have we're funded by the legislature to retrofit schools. That's our primary program right now. And we're adding between about 5,000 to 7,500 shelter spaces a year. And great support from the administration and from the legislature. We get over $2 million a year to do those retrofit projects. The other part, the other way that we're increasing our readiness is the new building codes that went into effect, I think in 2012, require that state and county public buildings that have a place where more than 300 people congregate has to be built to the enhanced hurricane protective standards, and that's great. I mean, those are the Miami-Dade County standards for a Category 5. Now. I'm sitting next to the head of the meteorology department. What I was told, and I'll verify this now to see if my guys were
on it.
were on it. What I've been told is that climatically, that currently, with current conditions, we will not see a Category 5 hurricane because of the sea surface temperatures and that Cat 4 is really the strongest that we can see. And we actually base a lot of we're basing our modeling and other things off Cat 4 hurricanes as the strongest.
That's correct.
Okay. Whew.
Got to get your guys some
Yeah,
posadas tomorrow
right?
and say good
There's
job.
a theory that was first developed maybe in the early 50s, but really got enhanced by a colleague of mine, Kerry Manuel, and it's called maximum potential intensity. And it just treats the storm as a thermodynamic issue, so it doesn't worry about wind shear. You take the SST and you take the top of the troposphere,
SST.
sea surface temperature.
Okay.
Thank you. And the tropopause temperature, which is as cold as it gets before it starts turning warm into the stratosphere.
Okay.
And you load those two in there with one or two other things, and then you can estimate what would be the maximum potential intensity. And when Kerry's plotted this up and looked for storms, it comes pretty darn close. Most storms do not, fortunately, reach MPI, as we call it, but the ones that do, and that map that he's developed, match up pretty well. And Iniki came pretty close to maximum potential intensity here,
Because
around 940 odd millibars.
The temperature of the ocean at
Right.
the time.
Yeah,
If-
it assumes a near perfect environment.
Right.
For the
storm gets
cyclone,
to
which
basically
rarely
sit
exists.
over there.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
there's-
from my unscientific background, I have to say this is surprising me because I can't remember a hotter time in Hawaii than the last couple of weeks. And so, why then is the ocean temperature not? And that's a very unscientific question, probably, but we've all felt so hot for so long. Why isn't the ocean temperature at the heat to generate that kind of storm?
Why isn't it hot enough?
It's
Because it's feeling hot enough.
well, it's not just the ocean
It's-
temperature.
That's the human response to the water. The water temperature, I think, is only around 28 and a half degrees Celsius right now. To reach a really severe storm, it goes extremely nonlinear response, but you'd need water temperatures over 31 degrees Celsius to get storms below 900 millibars.
And so even though
So it is warmer, and people are responding to that, and I got it, but
it doesn't
it
correlate
It isn't
with
31 yet.
Okay, all right. Okay.
That's
So-
the type of water that you might see in the West Pacific.
Yeah.
The really bathwater warm temperatures, or the Gulf of Mexico, maybe.
Often the Philippines get slammed with horrendous typhoons, which is just another name for a hurricane on the other side of the date line and north of the equator. But they have more intense systems because the water out there is 30 and 31 degrees C sometimes.
And it doesn't always correlate to what we're experiencing in terms of on land. Okay.
Of course, the other thing, too, to mention there is that, and this is typical for the main Hawaiian Islands, this is what protects us a lot of the time, is the strong wind shear. When you have strong upper level winds which are blowing, the islands are somewhat protected from either storms approaching us, and that's what's normal, which hasn't occurred as much this season, that it prevents storms from developing, or storms that are approaching the main Hawaiian Islands get essentially ripped apart. That warm core that Dr. Barnes spoke about gets tilted and essentially shredded, so the system can't become a self-sustaining entity where it becomes a storm and then develops into a hurricane. And we haven't seen those strong upper-level winds this year as much as, number one, we'd like, and number two, as is climatologically what happens over Hawaii.
Those would be helping to break up
Yes.
an approaching
Right.
storm. Okay. That was a question from Josh and Eva. How much does the water temperature play in the strength of a hurricane? So in short, it has a huge role in it.
Oh yeah, it's a big deal, but you have to worry about all the ingredients.
It's one of several ingredients, right?
Okay, this actually is the second time that this was brought up tonight, so I think it's worth asking. John in Waikiki is asking, is it possible that a lot of rain from this storm will slow the lava flow going to Pahoa?
Let me take that one.
Okay.
We've had a lot of discussions with the scientists in charge of volcanoes at the Hawaii Volcano Observatory. There's been a lot of discussion with Daryl Oliveira, who is the Civil Defense Administrator down in Hawaii County. And they've done a lot of research on stopping the volcanoes. And what they've found is that there's been no scientifically proven method for slowing the lava flow. So the amount of water, even though there is a lot of rain forecast for Hawaii Island, there is not any belief that the amount of water that falls will slow the lava in any way, shape, or form.
All right. What is a tropical cyclone? That's from Betty in Makiki.
From the research point of view, the gang likes to call a tropical cyclone anything that has become a named system. Okay. Operationally, they might treat it a little differently. So if you have 34 knots sustained wind or greater, you could be a tropical cyclone. In other parts of the world, around Australia and Indian Ocean, they never graduate to the term hurricane or typhoon. They call them tropical cyclones,
right there.
whether or not it's blowing 120 miles an hour or 34 knots or whatever.
So it's really just a difference of regions and how they want
Some
to
of it is,
classify.
but
Well, I was gonna
operationally
say-
now you could talk about a different definition a little bit.
Right. Well, the way we use it in the National Weather Service is tropical cyclone, and we actually try to sort of avoid that term in our products, but it's a generic way of referring to tropical storms, hurricanes, and tropical depressions. So that entire family of systems, which all sort of fit under the same umbrella, we can refer to them generically as a tropical cyclone. Typically, though, when we're trying to discuss threats with the public or talk to you about what's going to happen, we'll refer to it as a tropical storm or hurricane. So it's just a sort of a generic family name. But like Dr. Barnes said, regionally, though, tropical cyclone, say like down by Australia, is the term that they refer to everything. There are no hurricanes down
It's a
there.
blanket term.
Yeah, it's a blanket term.
While we're on this, since it came up, how do hurricanes get their names is another question.
That the list of names is submitted from the individual countries to the World Meteorological Organization. So it's not something that necessarily our office or anything like that. It can be a list of names which is submitted that gets approved by the organization. And in fact, when we retire names, that also needs to be approved, and they come up with a replacement name. It's not something that we do ourselves. We can certainly submit names or suggestions, but it's not a list that we create or come up with by ourselves.
Is there one person who gets to choose the name?
Well, as far as like what the next cyclone is going to be, there's a list of names for each basin. So the East Pacific has a separate list of names, the Central Pacific has a list of names, the Hawaiian names, and the West Pacific has their own list of names. So the next name that comes up is just the next name
Automatically.
in the
Yeah, following the alphabet.
Right.
In the old days, they chose names, so instead of tracking, there's a storm at 20 degrees north and 120 west and all this, people would rapidly get confused.
Right.
But if you said, well, we've got Hurricane Bob out there, and a nice name that you could hear over the radio and hear
makes
it instead
sense.
of Beelzebub or whatever,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then you'd say, I didn't get that on the radio, so the names were chosen so for clarity and to keep various disturbances and storms straight. Now it's gotten much more complicated because of cultural issues, so now there's names in the Western Pacific that are so complicated, Americans have a hard time pronouncing them, and that might cause some confusion, but it's more culturally driven now.
Right, broadening people's
Yeah.
horizons. Well, speaking of names, let's talk about one we'll all remember, Katrina. This is a question from Glenn in Kahaluu for Mr. Mayne. What lessons has Hawaii Civil Defense learned from Katrina? Have there been questions that would, or lessons that would apply here?
There's been huge lessons. The entire emergency management industry has, industry and organization has really changed since Katrina. We look at evacuation very differently. FEMA is now much more proactive, and actually you see that at the state level organizations also. We're not just sitting back and waiting for something to happen. We're forward with the counties, supporting the counties, and trying to get stuff moving rapidly. We also learned a lot about sheltering, about the fact that, as a matter of fact, there's part of the post-Katrina Emergency Management Reform Act required that every state pass a law to require the sheltering of pets, because they know, and I think they knew, but they really found out during Katrina that people won't go to a shelter if they can't take their pets. And so we've incorporated that. We have the counties establish people shelters and pet shelters. Oftentimes they're co-located. So there have been many lessons learned, and just the whole system of emergency management has changed radically since 2005.
All right, what is upswelling? Anyone want to take that?
Oh, it's probably upwelling,
Upwelling?
maybe. Maybe.
Let's make it upwelling. Okay.
Could be upswelling is as you go up, you're swelling. Okay.
Tell me about upwelling.
Upwelling is probably talking about water at a lower level in the ocean being brought up near the surface. And in fact, during El Niño, if you go to the west coast of South America, the water is much cooler right along the coast. The reason is the way the wind is blowing along the coast puts a stress on the ocean, and then it actually, in the net, moves water offshore. It's a little complicated. We call it the Ekman spiral. That draws water up from below, and that's what we call upwelling. And you can also see that in the wake of slow-moving tropical cyclones. So the storm might move over 28 degrees C water. If it's slow-moving enough because of the wave action, so not just the surface wave action, but a much larger response, you can see a wake of cold water, sometimes 2 and 3 degrees, maybe even greater than that, cooler behind it. And sometimes that has a very interesting effect. If there's a second tropical cyclone following along and it moves over this colder wake, the storm can often have a diminished intensity.
And I think we saw that with Julio, right? We had Isel with Julio following right along, and it ended up going, I think, crossing or traveling in that wake of cooler water. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. David, via email, should Hawaii Civil Defense request that FEMA develop plans and certification for conversion of old cargo containers? So a similar question to before. So it sounds like a lot of people are talking about sort of a perceived lack of shelter space. Do you think that there's any reality to that? Or
well, we do have a lack of shelter space, and we understand that, and we're building toward it. I think there are a lot of different ways to get to building shelters. That is certainly a way to look at it. One of the issues becomes, where are we going to put them? And where's the land that we are going to find to put these shelters into? And so it's a problem we're dealing with. Again, we've got a number of programs that are increasing the shelter capacity. At the same time, we're urging homeowners to retrofit their older homes. If they're in a single wall construction plantation style home, there's some great retrofit options there. Any of the homes built after about the mid-90s, when we started with our modern building codes, get some plywood, keep it on hand, board up the windows, and stay in your home. They're built to withstand a lot of that.
We're in our final 10 minutes. I'm going to try to get through as many of these questions as I can. From Sherry and Kailua Kona, why do the news stations only show the cone of uncertainty rather than the true size of the hurricane compared to the size of the islands? We were talking a little bit earlier about how these storms are shown. Do you think that there's a need sort of to display them in a different way?
Yeah, it's something that we've explored at work, for example. I think they're showing the cone of uncertainty because that's what we have highlighted. Past experience has shown that maybe that's a little bit misleading. We talked about that earlier. One of the things that we've started trying now, and you may have seen this over the past few years, is we use probabilities. So we use probability of tropical storm force winds. For those folks that have never experienced tropical storm force winds, those are roughly the winds at which you're going to see a fair amount of damage. Power outages and possibly some types of structural damage to weaker structures. We use that probability graphic, which is a series of colors. It starts at green at about 5%, ramps up to yellow at about 25%, and then it gets into the reds and oranges. Those may seem like low probabilities, but if you have a 1 in 3 chance, say, of having pretty significant damage to your house or losing power for a few days, then you probably would want to be ready for that. That probability graphic, I think, at least in my mind, expresses the danger much better than the cone of uncertainty, which is just where the center is likely to track. We've preached it before that damaging effects can occur far from the center, especially when you're on the right side of the system, which the Hawaiian Islands will be this weekend. So that's something that's of concern to us.
Okay. Dr. Barnes, is the high activity during this hurricane season suggesting something bigger is coming?
No. How's that?
No correlation. Okay.
I would be very edgy about making a climatological forecast. And the Atlantic will point this out. You've had a few years in which we had just a bumper crop of hurricanes, and then the whole group suddenly goes, the sky is falling, and then whammo, even 2 or 3 years in a row of hardly anything at all. And a lot of people tried to make a climatological or a whole season forecast. And almost without a man, they all were way off.
Weather is much more complicated than that.
Right.
If it were that easy, we'd be golden.
That goes to a question from David in St. Louis Heights. Thank you for all the scientific information, but can you please tell us if Ana is really going to hit us? So in other words, it's just too complicated to be able to make a blanket statement.
It is. Right now, we have to keep a really close eye on it. It's what I've been telling people is that it's too close to call. The latest guidance that we've gotten over the past few model runs seems to make it appear that the Hawaiian Islands are less of a threat, or in less of a threat from Ana, but the guidance is not perfect, and trends in the guidance do not necessarily guarantee tropical storm behavior. So everybody needs to pay attention just in case.
The typical errors, I think at 24 hours are about 50 nautical miles. At 48 hours it goes up to roughly 100, and by 72 it's 150. If you went back and looked at what those errors were 25 to 40 years ago, they were double that. So even though people are still, tell me where it's going to go, we've made a lot of strides towards getting that cone down, and so it's getting better.
Improved. You're right.
Yeah.
If you think about that 48-hour error of about 100 miles, 80 to 100 miles, you know, that's more than the distance between Kauai and Oahu. And so people want us, you know, 4 and 5 days out to say, well, which island is going to get hit? Which island, you know, are we going to get hit? Well, even 48 hours out, it's still, you know, the error cone, the amount of error in our forecast is still wider than the distance between, say, Kauai and Oahu at 48 hours. So
Sammy
it's
and
tough.
Aya asked, will science ever get to the point where we can accurately predict the behavior of a storm? So while it has improved, do you think we'll get to the point where it's ever perfect?
Perfect.
That's a
challenging
tough
Okay.
definition. We'll improve.
With the right instrumentation, we'll probably have to look for some breakthroughs in instrumentation, but I think it's possible to get a much better forecast.
We'll continue.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayne, let me ask this of you. In your judgment, has Tropical Storm Ana, is it being over-exaggerated?
No. We need to take it seriously. We will, as Bob and Dr. Barnes said earlier, we will suffer effects. There will be impacts from this storm, and we need to take it seriously.
Okay. From Lori and Aya, for Dr. Barnes and Mr. Ballard, what makes you say, quote, I better go buy some water? What are the what are the scary signs for you?
Well, earlier today, when Ana began to make the northwest turn or west-northwest turn that we were expecting, I was kind of hoping to see that Ana would remain weaker than we forecasted, which would imply that perhaps the motion would continue more toward the west rather than a turn toward the northwest a little bit closer to the islands. When I saw that, it got my attention. Now, beyond that, I hope that everyone would remain prepared throughout hurricane season. That's what we always preach, that people will get supplies for 5 to 7 days and have food, water, medicine, all of those things on hand. But we know that not everyone thinks exactly like that. For me, when I start seeing ominous signs like the tropical storm turning a little bit closer to the islands, you know, it's time to go shopping and get some things to.
So you've gotten to that point where you're
I did,
out buying
yeah,
water, right?
I sure did. Yeah.
What about yourself?
I'm behind the curve. I'm a bad example, but probably tonight I'll probably make sure I do. I already have some bottles of water in the house and things like that. But yeah, I think I'd be just reasonable to be prepared, because if it goes further north and it's a little stronger, and then you hit the water fountain and nothing comes on, or you're in a high rise and there's no electricity to pump anything, it's going to be a royal pain. And suddenly you're going to say, where's a glass of water? Which you can't go very long without having some.
And would that be the factor? I mean, this is a question, what are the common misconceptions of hurricane readiness? From your standpoint, if you're going to skimp on something, would water be the thing not to skimp on?
The two most important things are food and water. 7 days of food and water, and that's at a gallon of water per person for you and your pets. and you need to set it aside. We urge everybody to do as much as they can. I understand it's very expensive. A lot of us live in pretty small apartments where you can't have a whole store of food. But look at what's in your pantry. You probably have a few days of supply in your pantry as it is. It doesn't need to be special set aside. Just keep your pantry well stocked, and that could take care of the 7 days of food. And then you can get water bladders that you can put in, big plastic bladders that you can put in your bathtub. You can fill those up. So it doesn't necessarily need to be bottled water either. There's other ways to get to the amount of water that you need.
Just in terms of containers you have on
Exactly
hand.
right, exactly right. Or you go buy one for $30 or $40 and it stays on the shelf, and when you need to fill it up,
And
you
have
fill
that
it up.
permanently, because from our conversation, this could be something we're all repeatedly having to go through.
Exactly right.
All right, well, thank you. I might be seeing all of you guys in the grocery aisle on the way home tonight. You guys have definitely increased my awareness. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having us.
On the next Insights, on November 4th, voters will not only be choosing candidates, but they'll also be casting votes on ballot initiatives, including one that asks whether public dollars should be used to get more low and middle income children into preschool. That's next week on Insights. I'm Malia Mattoch. Be safe, everyone. Ahui ho.